It's time to get to work for the Silver and Black as well. The head coaching search is underway. That plus more on Wednesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for January 7th, 2026.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one sports podcast network. We're very proud of that. We're also very proud of the fact that this show continues to grow each and every day, and that's because of your consistent support and the great job that my man Ari does behind the scenes, making sure we look good and sound good by way of the YouTube page. So we shout him out. We appreciate him. He's on Twitter at Ari Produces, and of course, Raider Nation, without you, there is no show at all. So we definitely tip the cap to you. We appreciate you, and thank you for coming back to the show each and every day. You want to be a part of the show, you can hit us up on our Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. As a matter of fact, we'll close out the show hearing from you. Calls, texts, lots of feedback off everything going on with the Raiders, and trust and believe it's a lot busier on the phone lines and the text line now than it was during the regular season, but that's what happens when the team is only a 3-win team. Right? There's a lot of calls that folks don't want to make. There's a lot of texts that folks don't want to send. And a lot of times there's a lot of negativity. But I believe a lot of Raider Nation sees the potential for the light at the end of the tunnel and is pretty excited about what this offseason is going to bring. So we'll hear from you as we close out the show in segment number 3. Segment number 2, we'll talk about the Raiders and the fact that they have to get it right. You'll hear from some folks that, again, say that the Raiders have to get it right this offseason, and some that don't believe or trust that the Raiders will do because, well, the track record is just not there. We'll talk about that. I'll explain it in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Here in segment number 1, news and notes of the day, and it really has to do with the head coaching search, and the Raiders are officially off and running. We'll jump into that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, and that's FanDuel. The wild card round is here. FanDuel is officially in playoff mode, so visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game. And, of course, it gets started on Saturday. So the Raiders are off and running when it comes to putting in requests to interview potential candidates for their open head coaching position. So Vinny Bonsignore from the Las Vegas Review-Journal and also Raider Nation Radio 920 put out a piece early on Tuesday that the Raiders put in a request for Broncos defensive coordinator Vance Joseph. This could be a virtual interview since the Broncos are the top AFC seed. They have a bye week this week. So again, virtual interviews are allowed. He actually interviewed with the Raiders last year before the Raiders decided to settle on head coach Pete Carroll. And we know that that didn't work out. One and done. So Vance Joseph, defensive coordinator for the Broncos, has been requested. Then a little bit later on, I saw from Albert Breer from Monday Morning Quarterback, SI, that Clint Kubiak has been requested by the Raiders. He put out a tweet and said, Seahawks OC Clint Kubiak has gotten a request to interview for the Giants, Cardinals, Raiders, and Falcons head coaching jobs per source. His focus is on the playoffs, so he'll take a day or two and figure out a plan to balance all of it. Seattle's on a bye as the NFC's number 1 seed. So again, virtual interview is allowed with Clint Kubiak, and I respect the fact that he's in the playoffs and he's trying to figure out how to balance it all out. That's always pretty difficult, but the interview requests are going in. That's how the Raiders interviewed Ben Johnson last year, was virtually, and we all know that he ended up going to Chicago and be with Caleb Williams. We see the success that they have. They're in the playoffs this year, but that's how it's going to get done for the first round if, in fact, these candidates do choose to accept the Raiders' request. Also, a little bit later on Tuesday, dipping back into the Denver Broncos organization, Mike Cliffs from 9 News in Denver reported, he said, source confirms Broncos quarterback coach Davis Webb received interest requests from the Raiders head coach or Raiders about their head coaching opening. Raiders have the number 1 pick in 2026 draft. They figure to take either Oregon quarterback Dante Moore or Indiana quarterback Fernando Mendoza, and Webb's work with Bo Nix has been impressive. So that was an interesting one. That one actually caught my attention. I know that Davis Webbs is a guy, I should say, that has a lot of respect around the league. He's only 30 years old. I actually reached out to my guy John McClain to ask a little bit about him. He was in the Texans organization at one point, and he said, yeah, he's a sharp mind. He's a guy that has been, working on getting his, kind of talent evaluation and scouting skills down. And so that's an interesting little nugget. Also, you're probably wondering right now, like, why are they dipping into the Denver Broncos organization so many times? Well, think about this. Mark Thews, He is from the Denver organization. He is the Raiders' senior vice president of football operations and strategy. He worked with John Spytek. John Spytek has spent time in Denver, so he knows Thews really well. Matter of fact, they're really tight. I remember when they hired Thews. I remember my guy, Brandon Cristal, who's up in Denver covering the Broncos, does a heck of a job there. Matter of fact, he's going to be on my radio show a little bit later on this afternoon to talk about both Davis Webb and Vance Joseph. And he said, yeah, hey, Thews is sharp, man. He's sharp. He's a guy that you definitely want in your organization, and him and Spytek will do some really good things together. So not saying that they're going to hire someone from Denver, but don't be shocked and surprised by the way that they've double dipped into that organization to ask for to request an interview with those guys. So they're off and running. Vance Joseph, Clint Kubiak, and quarterback coach Davis Webb all have been requested by the Silver and Black. And look, they may have requested Davis Webb to be their quarterback or their head coach, but remember, he's a quarterback coach in Denver. So maybe they don't end up going with him as the head coach. Maybe they have him be the offensive coordinator, right? There's different strategies of this. Last year, the Raiders, they requested Robert Saleh and wanted to interview him for their head coaching position, but they really wanted him as a defensive coordinator. And then when Pete Carroll was ready to pass the sticks on, then he was going to be the head coach in waiting, and that didn't work out. So sometimes the request may come in to be the head coach, and they go in for the interview, and then they talk to him, get some interest, and then maybe come back later on and say, hey, we want you as the OC. That would still be an upgrade from the position that Davis Webb is currently in at the quarterback coach. So again, I'm not saying that that's what's happening. I'm just throwing that out there as another potential scenario that could be in play here. Also, the big news in the NFL on Tuesday, John Harbaugh, after 18 years, is out as the Baltimore Ravens head football coach. And you're probably saying, well, okay, well, what does that have to do with the Raiders? Well, I talked about it on Tuesday. I felt like the Giants and the Raiders were the best two head coaching openings across the league. Now the Baltimore Ravens have one, and I immediately put them at the top of the list, at the number one spot. They have a two-time MVP, regular season MVP, and Lamar Jackson. They have that quarterback there. They have a front office that I think is one of the best front offices in the league. Harbaugh had just been there for 18 years, so stability is not a problem. They normally have a really good defense. Obviously, they didn't this year, but I feel like that they'll definitely get that turned around, especially now the fact that they moved on from Harbaugh. So that position, that head coaching job with the Ravens, is, to me, the number one spot. Then you're looking at, okay, who's number two? Giants, Raiders. Some are saying the Falcons. I don't think the Falcons, because they don't have a first-round pick. They don't have very much salary cap space. They have questions at the quarterback position, but they do play in a very winnable, I don't want to say easy, nothing's easy in the NFL, a winnable division in the NFC South. So that's why a lot of people look at that as a very intriguing and attractive opening. I still think the Raiders, with the number one overall pick, all the salary cap space they have, 10 draft picks, right? I mean, I just think that they are an attractive opening. But again, stability is something I talked about on Tuesday's show that they haven't shown that they'll have. They haven't shown that they have patience with a potential next head coach. So that will be the one downfall when it comes to, hiring the next coach. And are they going to be 10 toes down and believe, yep, this is the best place for me, and have trust that the organization will be patient with them. So now the Raiders, Falcons, Browns, Cardinals, Giants, Titans, and Ravens are all available. And now John Harbaugh is available as a head coach as well. I would not be surprised if the Raiders at least put a request in to him, try to at least reach out and gauge interest in an interview. Not saying that they're going to hire him, but definitely reach out. And I don't think that they're going to leave any stone unturned. So I would not be shocked to see them interview John Harbaugh at some point. I think that they're going to be aggressively patient when it comes to hiring this next head coach. And what that means is they're going to not just lock in on one potential candidate. They're going to go ahead and talk to many different candidates from many different backgrounds, offense, defense, CEO style coaches, whatever the case may be. I don't think that they're going to just lock in on one guy like they have the last few times. Also, the last little nugget I got for you for segment number one here at today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Really good article from Ryan McFadden and Kalen Kaler on ESPN.com. Inside Raiders 2025 collapse, Tom Brady's influence, and it really details in great length. I encourage you to go check it out on ESPN.com. All the dysfunction that was going on behind the scenes with the Silver and Black, and just all the things that the players themselves had to try to do to try to, come together and put together some kind of scheme and, offensive, the blocking scheme, the offensive line. It was just a lot of dysfunction. It's too much for me to just describe and break down to you. but just go check it out on ESPN.com. Like I said, Ryan McFadden, Kalen Kaler, I think they did a great job. Inside Raiders 2025 collapse, Tom Brady's influence. So coming up in segment number 2, the Raiders must get it right. Those are not just my words. Many folks believe that they have to get it right. Some believe that they can, others not so much. We'll talk about that coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, I do want to tell you about a couple great sponsors we have here on the show. And the first one is the Ultimate QB Football Legend. Have you ever wished to become a pro QB? Getting drafted first overall by the Raiders? Well, now you can. Mobile game is just for you, called Ultimate QB Football Legend. In this game, you step into the cleats of a number 1 draft pick, right? And it's your job to lead your team to greatness to help turn a failing franchise into a dynasty. This is the number 1 QB career mode game on the mobile app stores, and it introduces the most realistic environment with full career control. You sign contracts, you train, you upgrade yourself, build chemistry, evolve your teammates, get input into your GM on roster moves, play the actual games in 2D, and rise through the ranks to become a pro football legend. Ultimate QB is totally free, has no ads, works 100% offline, perfect when you want to sneak in a game or two on the go. Head over to ultimate-qb.com. That's ultimate-qb.com, or search for Ultimate QB in your app store. And we've got something special just for you guys. The promo code is Locked On, all one word, all in caps, in the game store to get a free boost at the start of your career. Ultimate QB, football legend, QB1, it's your legacy. I also want to tell you about Zocdoc. Finding a doctor you actually like can feel like discovering a diamond in the rough. You want someone in the network, nearby, with availability, but you also want a doctor who really listens, makes you feel comfortable, explains things clearly, and helps you walk out feeling confident about your next step. Your diamond in the rough doctor exists, and finding them is easy with Zocdoc. Zocdoc is a free app and website that helps you find and book high-quality in-network doctors so you can choose someone you truly connect with. Appointments usually happen within 24 to 72 hours. They can even have same-day openings. If you need to book care fast, this is the first place you need to go. It just makes the process simple, and you can check the verified patient reviews to get a real sense of the doctor's vibe and communication style. So stop putting off doctor appointments. Go to ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL to find and instantly book a doctor that you'll love today. That's ZocDoc, ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. Thanks to Zocdoc for sponsoring the show here at the Locked On Raiders podcast. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to talk about the fact that the Raiders need to get this right. I've talked about this for a while. They have an opportunity that they haven't had in quite a while. John Spytek mentioned that on Monday when he had his press conference at the facility, and they've got to do this, right? Tom Brady, John Spytek, and together, according to Mark Davis, right, football operations, they're going to lead the charge, and John Spytek's going to lead it and work really tightly with Tom Brady. I mentioned in segment number 1 the job openings, the Raiders, the Falcons, the Browns, the Cardinals, the Giants, the Titans, the Ravens, 7 of them right now. Who knows if that changes after Monday night, right? Maybe the Steelers' job opens up if they lose to the Texans and Mike Tomlin says, all right, thanks, but no thanks, or they decide to mutually part ways, or however you want to word it to make it sound a little bit cleaner. Maybe one more job opens, maybe not. Whatever the case may be, there's at least 7 at this stage of the game. So, I've talked about stability. I've talked about potential candidates coming in and how good do they feel about the organization, with the vision that they share, but then not running out of patience. And so I wanted you to hear from a couple different people about this Raiders job and their opportunity to do things right. Michelle Smallman from Unsportsmanlike on ESPN Radio early on Tuesday morning, she was talking about her confidence level when it comes to the Raiders getting it right. And trust and believe, it wasn't that high.
It was shocking to me how bad the Raiders were. Did I expect them to, in 1 year, turn this team to a Super Bowl champion? No. Did I expect them to be tough, competitive? Absolutely. And they were neither. Tom Brady has to wear that one, even though I want to put faith in him and his ability to be excellent at everything that he does. I also have no faith in Mark Davis and the Raiders to get this right.
Now, it's funny when she says that she doesn't have the confidence in Mark Davis and the organization to get it right. Some will say, oh, she's just hating. She's part of the national media. They're always hating on the Raiders. But in fact, they haven't proven that they can get it right. They haven't proven to be stable. They haven't proven to be able to be willing to see the whole process out. The only person that they showed that patience with was John Gruden. And then the rug got pulled from under him when, his emails resurfaced, and we don't have to rehash what all happened, but we all know how he ended up not being the head coach anymore. But that was the last time that they showed patience. After that, it was Bisaccia, interim, gone. Josh McDaniels, there for a year and a half, gone. AP interim, AP for a year, gone. Pete Carroll, 1, gone, right? And so that's just the scenario that it is. So I know Smalls sounded like she was, low-key hating, or maybe not even low-key hating on the Raiders, but in fact, that's the question. And that's the question I bring it to the table, because that's the question that folks are going to have nationally. How good is that job, because of the questions of stability and what they have not shown? Rich Gannon, obviously, he respects the silver and black quite a bit, was on SiriusXM NFL talking about the Raiders and their head coaching position and how it's open and what they got to do this offseason. And again, he doubles down. They have to get it right.
I think, when you start this whole process, when you're looking for a head coach, there's a lot that goes into it. First is experience. Does he have experience? Has he been a head coach at any level? Does he have, is he a prominent coordinator that is ready for this next opportunity? What is his leadership skills like? What is his organizational and management ability like? Does he have a plan? Is he able to, help with the selection of players in terms of the draft and free agency? Can he put together a coaching staff? I just think there's a lot that goes into that process of interviewing. Tom doesn't have a lot of experience doing it, nor do I. Right? There's people who sit in those chairs, Bruce, and they conduct a lot of interviews. They've been doing it for a long time. John Spytek is going to have to be very involved in the process, along with Tom Brady, apparently. It sounds like Mark Davis doesn't really want to be involved in that process. He wants to let these two guys make that decision, which is fine. But they got to get it right.
So Rich Gannon brings up a great point, right? Tom and John Spytek working together. Tom doesn't have that experience of interviewing head coaches for a job there in an organization. He just hasn't been there, done that. I've talked about it quite a bit. I always refer to Michael Jordan because I live in the world where Michael Jeffrey Jordan is the greatest basketball player to ever play. But when he was the owner, when he was trying to put together a roster, when he was trying to hire a head coach, he was not very good at it. And sometimes when you're the greatest of all time at what you do, it's not that easy to become a really good head coach or a really good GM or a really good owner, because it's just, you wonder, like, how come everyone that you select and you have faith in or you bring in, how come they can't do it at your level? Well, they're not you, right? I mean, you have that extra quality. But, Rich Gannon talking about must get it right, right? Tom and John working together, don't have a lot of experience, but that's where Mark Davis, and that's based off the statement that he made, that's what Mark Davis wants. He wants John Spytek to lead all charges, right? John Spytek had mentioned in his press conference he had on Monday that they wants everyone to be on the same timeline, share the same vision. So everything sounds good right now, but until it's actually put in motion, and when head coaches are gonna have struggles, when there's ultimately some fails, are they going to be patient enough to see it through? That's always going to be the big question. But I thought a really good soundbite came from Tom Telesco, former Raiders GM. He was only the GM for 1 year. I never had a problem with Telesco. I felt like he became collateral damage. Antonio Pierce got let go. I thought we're going to keep Tom Telesco in place, and then they wanted to open it up for, okay, we're going to bring in a head coach, and he wants his own GM, not Tom Telesco. He wants somebody that he can work hand in hand with. So then they cleared the deck. And I think that they did that for Ben Johnson, even though ultimately they didn't get Ben Johnson. But I thought Tom Telesco did a good job the 1 year that he was with the team. So here he is on SiriusXM NFL talking about trading Max, because he was asked a question, talked about Pete Carroll, what went wrong, and what they need to do, what they need to work on, and what they have in place. I thought this was some really good sound from former Raiders GM Tom Telesco.
Do I think the Raiders would trade Max Crosby? No, I still don't think they will. But it just didn't work out with Pete Carroll this year. I thought he was going to give them some stability that they hadn't had, and it just didn't quite work out. But they've got some things to work on, just team building wise. And I think, I have a unique perspective here. I was only there 1 year. I do feel like with this next hire, and I know that the fans get tired of hearing that, hey, this next one's going to be the one, but I think they'll be on the same page, the same vision. And this is important because you also have the number one draft pick, which is going to be a quarterback. But you're looking at an organization, and I was part of this, where, for 3 straight years, the draft, you were drafting players for a different head coach for 3 straight years. And it's going to be the 4th year of that. And that's where the rebuilds, it starts to slow down, because, every head coach has a different thoughts, philosophies, schemes. sometimes when the new head coach comes in, he's not as much invested in some players that were drafted previous. So they have to get to a point where they have some stable front office, stable head coach, because this team has great resources. They really do. Between the stadium, the practice facility is one of one. It's amazing. They've got a worldwide fan base. Mark Davis is a passionate owner who lets football people make football decisions. They've got great leadership on the business side with Sandra Douglas Morgan. So it's set up really well. And they have talented support staffs there, like training, equipment. I thought the scouting staff was excellent when I arrived there. So there's a lot of great pieces. Just got to find the stability at the top and start building to that. And, having the first pick of the draft, they can finally get a quarterback to build around is key.
So no trade for Max, right? And I'm right there with them. The only way that I think Max gets traded, I know I'm probably in the minority with that. I think a lot of people believe Max is going to be on the move. I think the only way he gets traded is if he, in fact, asked to be traded. And who knows how he's feeling? Who knows, what he's going to want? Obviously, he left at the end of the season after they decided to put him on IR and shut him down. I know that didn't go over well with him, but I'm sure that at some point cooler heads will prevail. And, especially after he sees whoever they hire as the head coach, I'm sure then that'll probably intrigue him. But again, I can't speak for him. We can only see how this thing plays out. But, I think Tom Telesco brings up a great point. 3 straight years now, they're drafting for a new head coach, right? You were drafting for Josh McDaniels. Then you were drafting for Antonio Pierce. Then you were drafting for Pete Carroll. Now you're going to be drafting for another coach, right? That's why when you're trying to rebuild, you're trying to get the franchise turned around, it doesn't work because you're drafting players that fit in that former coach's scheme and that former coach's plans. And so, if Dave Ziegler is drafting for Josh McDaniels, then he gets fired the next year, and then Antonio Pierce is the head coach. Okay, well, now Tom Telesco is drafting for Antonio Pierce, and then he gets fired. Okay, well, those players that you just drafted for McDaniels, all right, now they fit what he wants to do, but not what AP wants to do. And now you just drafted for AP, and he's gone. And so the players that you just drafted, they don't fit with what Pete Carroll wants. And then you draft guys that Pete Carroll wants, and now they might not fit with what the next guy wants. That's how this cycle continues, and that's why the Raiders have been in the same spot that they've been in for a long time. I like the fact that he mentioned all the good that the Raiders have, right? And the fact that they're in a good position to go get quarterback 1. He sounded very convinced that they're going to go get quarterback at number 1. I'm okay with that. If Fernando Mendoza is their guy or Dante Moore is their guy, then so be it, right? And Dante Moore, obviously, we still have questions if he's going to even come out or not. But I like the fact that as a former GM, he just kept saying, hey, they got their chance to go get their quarterback. And remember, he got the Chargers turned around when he was able to draft Justin Herbert. And, well, that's obviously a really good decision. And drafting Justin Herbert brought on Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh wanted the Chargers because he wanted Justin Herbert. So I just thought that passing that sound along would be valuable and just kind of get an understanding of what others were talking about the organization, how their eyeballs are seeing it, and what they think that they need to do. Michelle Smallman, Rich Gannon, and former Raiders GM Tom Telesco. Coming up in segment number 3, we hear from you. Your calls and texts will close us out, 707-654-4693. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, and that's FanDuel. The wild card round is here. FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. What do you mean by that, Q? Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply to the bets you like the most. So what do? You open your profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boost you want to apply. The boost lets you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defense, quarterback play, coaching, whatever the case may be. The boost gives you more juice on the bets that you already like instead of forcing you to bet something new. Every play feels bigger, and the boosts make your bets feel that way too. You make your picks, then apply your profit boost to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts are off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. We do want to thank you for making this the first listen of the day. We definitely appreciate that. We'll start things off with a text from Bobby G from Florida, the Florida Raider from the 386. Bobby G, the Florida Raider from the 386. I just want to call him OG Bobby Johnson. He says, hey, Q, longtime listener and texter since 2017. Love the show. Was wondering if you spoke to Mel Kiper Jr. yet and his take on which quarterback it is, Mendoza or Dante Moore, that Raider Nation should go with. Me, myself, I like Mendoza. I did listen to Tom McShay's take that Mendoza is the guy that they could plug and play and win a bunch of games right away and having character of a leader. But he said Dante Moore will have a better 10-year career because of him being the best pure passer in college football and having a little edge to him. Like to know your thoughts, and if you'll have Kiper on the show. Love all you and Ari do. Bobby G, the Florida Raider from the 386, a.k.a. OG Bobby Johnson. So thanks so much for the text. I appreciate you. I just threw the OG Bobby Johnson in there myself. But anyway, no, I haven't talked to Mel yet, but I do know that Dante Moore is his QB1. I know that for a fact. Now, the other good thing is I'll be talking to Field Yates from ESPN, who also is a really good draft analyst. I'll actually be talking to him this afternoon on my radio show. So, of course, I'll talk all things Dante Moore, talk all things Fernando Mendoza. I like Mendoza between the ears. I think he's really, really sharp. I think he's a hell of a leader. I think he's a guy that this organization could use. I also believe Dante Moore's ceiling is higher. But if you're looking for a guy that can be, just a great passer, a great leader, right? He has enough mobility for me. I don't need a guy that's going to, be a video game running around out there. Just need a guy that's willing to use his legs. He can do that. He goes through his progressions. I like both guys. I really do. I don't know if Dante Moore comes out. I'll be so interested to see what happens on Friday when we got to see them go head-to-head, round 2, but this time in a playoff setting. I cannot wait to see that, because that also will really determine how Raider Nation feels about both those quarterbacks, both Fernando Mendoza and Dante Moore, when they see him go head-to-head. But, yeah, I'll have Field Yates on my radio show, so I'll bring some sound from that back to the podcast for tomorrow. And, of course, I'll catch up with Mel sooner rather than later. We'll be deep diving into the draft sooner rather than later. I really want to see who the Raiders hire as a head coach first, because then we can start to get an idea. Let's just say, Cliff Kingsbury, who's no longer part of the Washington Commanders, say that they decide that they want to go after him. Well, then I think that Dante Moore would probably fit what he wants to do more than Fernando Mendoza. I'm not saying that 100%, but I just think that would be more his style based off the offenses that we know. So I think we'll get a better idea of what quarterback's going to fit with this team better once we actually know who the head coach is. But thanks so much for the text. I definitely appreciate you. Got a call from Cornhusker Raider. He's calling to talk about the 2 wins the Raiders had on Sunday, the dismissal of head coach Pete Carroll, and more. Here's Cornhusker Raider.
I know we haven't had a Victory Monday in over 2 months, but it sounds like you might have forgotten the game balls. And either way, obviously my game ball would go to Daniel Carlson. Crazy. Cash Money Carlson made a return. Perfect time to break the Chiefs' win streak at Allegiant Stadium. Awesome. Also, obviously, Tyree Wilson balled out for us. Game ball would go to him, too. But honestly, the main reason I'm calling is last season, this exact same time, I think I even called in saying, hey, we got to keep Antonio Pierce. I love him, blah, blah, blah. And it's been a day since the league or the season ended, and we have fired him, so we must be keeping him. And then next day we fired him. But I think getting rid of Pete Carroll the morning after the regular season ended kind of shows that, hey, we got this first-round pick. We can get kind of a newer, younger, more interesting guy. When I say that, just as in like a quarterback or a coach is going to want someone really good at quarterback or someone that can see the benefit of the first-round pick. So I think that's just great. You say it all the time, for entertainment purposes only, for whatever, but it feels like we're for business right now, and actually a little bit happy to be a Raiders fan today and sporting my Raiders badge reel proudly today. And, oh, by the way, it's Cornhusker Raider. So thanks for all you do, Q, Ari. Just winning, baby.
Cornhusker, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate it. It's funny, man. I wanted to give out game balls, but I didn't have enough show on Monday, right? That's why I mentioned some guys who I thought did really well, especially the guys that you mentioned, like Cash Money Carlson, and then the defense having 8 sacks, right? Obviously, offense was optional for both teams. No touchdowns scored at all, right? I mean, that was one of those. It's just like, man, four field goals from the Raiders and a safety, and then multiple field goals from the Chiefs. So, I mean, it was one of those. There wasn't a whole lot of game balls, but Cash Money Carlson was a guy I had a lot of respect for, especially kicking that 60-yarder to win the game, and the defense with the 8 sacks. As far as moving on from Pete Carroll, I mean, hey, they did it right? Didn't make him go speak with us on Monday like they did with AP last year. They worked all night, apparently, getting their ducks in a row, no leaks. When the news dropped that he was out, the statement was coming out from Mark Davis at the same time, right? They had the opportunity to make a full reset, align the next head coach with potentially a brand new quarterback, but just wipe the slate clean. You got the number 1 overall pick. You got options. You got draft capital. You got salary cap space. Like, just make everything clean, and most importantly, get on the same page with the GM, with Tom Brady, with everyone who's in the decision-making process for this team. Clearly, that was a disconnect with Pete Carroll and John Spytek. So thanks so much for that. I do appreciate you. I got a text from Mike in Buffalo. Short and sweet. Hey, Q, Mike from Buffalo. John Harbaugh. Go Raiders. That's it. That was all. So I don't have to explain that one. You know what he means by that. Mike, thanks for the text. Appreciate you. Tommy from the 925. He's calling to talk about all the money the Raiders are paying former coaches. Here's Tommy from the 925.
Yo, what's up, Q? Tommy from the 925. I just seen something on Instagram saying this year, 2026, we're paying $50 million to old coaches, and I know our cap space was like, it was like 100-something million. So that only leaves us with half of the money that we're supposed to have to use for now, and we're paying for our past actions. So, I just want to bring that to the show. Love what you guys do. Love what you and Ari do. Thanks for, making the show and everything. It really is the first listen of the day. And, yeah, have a good one.
Tommy, thanks so much for the call. Two things. Yes, the Raiders are paying $50 million to former coaches, but that doesn't affect the salary cap. You can pay a coach as much as you want. There's no cap on that, right? The salary cap affects the top 51 in the offseason and all 53 on the active roster during the regular season. So you don't have to worry about that. No sweat off of how much they're paying, former coaches. Now, it stinks that they have that many former coaches on the payroll still. That's not good. That's less than ideal, but it's not going to be anything that's going to affect the salary cap. So you can rest easy with that. We'll get one more in. This is a text from Todd in San Diego. All I can think of is Mel Kiper and Todd McShay. Todd. Todd in San Diego. He says, hey, Q. Todd from San Diego here. My takeaway from Spytek's presser is he basically said, trust the process without saying trust the process, meaning this is going to be a slow, steady rebuild. I still wish they would say those words, though. Fans may not like it, but come on. It's better than the promise and complete letdown season after season after season. It can't get worse, so acknowledge how bad it is and give hints of a plan without giving it away. The fans can grasp the concept of the philosophy is simple. It's been done in pro sports before. That's Todd in San Diego. You're right, and he basically said that, right? I mean, he didn't necessarily say it's going to take multiple years, but he didn't say it was going to be an overnight thing. He said, don't expect 10 wins right away. Don't expect them to be, the Jacksonville Jaguars 1 year turnaround, New England Patriots 1 year turnaround, or Washington like they had year one with Jaden Daniels. Like, he specifically said that. So, he said that he believes that those teams, well, they have success 1 year, it's not stable, right? He doesn't believe that it's stable. He's looking for stability. And if you look at Washington, well, they weren't successful, right? They're picking in the top 10 of the NFL draft this year. So they went from the NFC championship game to the top 10 of the draft, right? Jacksonville obviously has TBD. They're in the postseason. Obviously with the New England Patriots has TBD as well. But yeah, he basically said that. I mean, he didn't have to come out and say it's a full rebuild for everyone to understand that. And that's why Raider Nation is going to have to use some patience. But not only is Raider Nation going to have to be patient, the organization is going to have to be patient. Like, everyone in the organization is going to have to understand you're going to take some lumps. There's going to be some bad days. We come back to the show and everyone's going to say, oh my gosh, this is stupid. I hate this. Pulling their hair out, right? And just, I'm done with it. I'm not watching any more Raider football. I'm not listening to the show anymore, Q, right? That's going to happen. But you have to understand, and the organization has to understand, that it is a process, like you said. Trust the process, and they've got to get this right. And I don't want to say they wasted a year, with the process, because they weren't all the way in on the process. It was, 1 foot in on rebuilding and another foot in on winning right now. And that's really hard to do. And I mentioned that early in the season, that it's hard to do both at the same time. But thanks so much for the text. Definitely appreciate you. That's going to do it for today's show. Raider J-Bone from the 9 Dime. We got a call from him, a text from Raider Morpheus. We'll get that on. As I mentioned, Field Yates, he's supposed to be on my radio show, so I'll bring some sound when it comes to Mendoza, when it comes to Moore, when it comes to other, his thoughts on the Raiders having the number 1 overall draft pick, what kind of head coach he possibly thinks can, be a good one for the Raiders organization. I'll bring anything that I think stands out from that interview. I'll bring it to the show tomorrow as well. Of course, we'll have news and notes, and we'll see how many more interview requests the Raiders put out there in their search for the next head coach. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.